it's time for the press preview. A first look at what is on tomorrow's front pages. And tonight we'll see what's making the headlines with the communications advisor and former aide to Boris Johnson, Guto Harri, and the political correspondent at PolticsJoe, Nadine Batchelor-Hunt. A very good evening to both of you. We'll chat in a moment. First of all, let's check out some of those front pages for you. Starting with the Metro. Carry the can is their headline, as the Prime Minister says he loves John Lewis. Well, The Sun reports that Carrie Simons has been invited to appear on Strictly Come Dancing and could use her earnings to fund the Downing Street refurbishment. On the front of the Express, Boris Johnson hits back at his critics, saying he is focusing on the post-pandemic recovery. The Telegraph says social distancing at major events will end on the 21st of June after initial results from a pilot scheme found no spike in cases. Let's slide in the Mail for you. The number of people falling ill with COVID is said to have fallen to the lowest level since the pandemic began. The FT says that the US economy is recovering strongly thanks to a fiscal stimulus package and the country's successful vaccine rollout. The Yorkshire Post quotes Transport Secretary Grant Shapps as saying that construction of the HS2 rail project should probably have started in the north. And the Star reports on the end of the drama series Line of Duty, happening this weekend. And I'm joined tonight by Guto Harri and Nadine Batchelor-Hunt. A very good evening to both of you. Good to see you. Plenty to go on in the papers. Why don't we start then with the front of the Metro? Guto, why don't you kick things off? Be good to get your thoughts on where we are now. And interestingly, a couple of papers, the Metro and the Sun, both have got pictures of Carrie Simons, sort of pointing a finger at her somewhat. I mean, is this slightly sexist, do you think? Is she the right person to be being blamed?
It feels sexist, doesn't it? It feels like a cheap shot. It feels like they can't quite get at the Prime Minister, so they go for the partner. I think, in all honesty, the wallpaper, the taste, the interior design is almost certainly hers, because, you know, from my knowledge of the Prime Minister, he really doesn't care very much what's hanging on the wall, nor indeed what is on the floor beneath his feet. So I think it's fair enough to assume that she's responsible for the decorations, but unfair, I think, to drag her into a political row. And I have to say, the whole thing seems largely ridiculous. And what we have tonight, when there are so many critical things going on in the UK and in the world, is both Keir Starmer, as the leader of the official opposition, and the Prime Minister Boris Johnson having to plead to us that they are both fans of John Lewis, because somebody must have told them that the focus group suggests that being harsh on John Lewis is bad for all those sort of swing voters somewhere in the middle there who rely on stores like that.
Yeah, Guto, I'm just going to stay with you, because you say it's all vaguely ridiculous, and it has got somewhat farcical, I have to say, on the front pages. But there are 3 investigations into this flat refurbishment. Even the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards today saying that there could well be a 4th. So to people watching this programme and to people reading the papers, they're going to be furious, aren't they?
Yeah, furious at what? Furious because all that sort of legal expertise is being devoted into checking out who actually, if anyone, provided a sort of interim payment to facilitate something that the Prime Minister has made very clear he ended up paying for himself. So we're just talking about the nature of the financing, if there was anything like a loan to get some work done. We're not talking about public money here. We're talking about private money that may not have been declared properly, if that. The idea that 3 official investigations should be launched into this when we're mid-pandemic, when there are all kinds of complications for Brexit, when the world has so many things to ponder, really is ridiculous. And I must say, you know, it's not to say that these things don't matter at all, but they've been blown out of all perspective. OK, let's find out what Nadine has to say about it. YouGov poll tonight putting the Tories 11 points ahead. Guto saying that it's not taxpayers' money and therefore it's not going to cut through. What do you think?
I think some of it is taxpayers' money. I think the Prime Minister gets £30,000 from the public purse to renovate the flat. So I don't think it's entirely fair to say it's not all public money, unless I'm mistaken. I think more broadly, it's interesting that the polls really aren't going to make a massive difference when it comes to what happens with the Electoral Commission. And I think to some level, HMRC. This is quite interesting. I wrote a piece earlier talking about how it could be the Al Capone moment for Boris, because at the end of the day, this doesn't matter what it says in the polls, how the Conservatives are polling. It's what the Electoral Commission finds, and he could be interviewed under caution if he's broken the rules. And we all are governed by rules. We all have to abide by the rules, and we should expect our Prime Minister to as well. I don't think he should be an exception. But I also do agree there are also important things going on. I think the reason this story is important, though, is because what happens with the Electoral Commission could affect his premiership and whether or not he's Prime Minister this time next year.
And Nadine, front page of The Sun, tango and cash for curtains. What do you make of this angle that Carrie Simons could hit the Strictly dance floor? The Sun is saying to fund her £200,000 flat refurbishment.
I find it quite distasteful, this stuff about Carrie. I think on the front page of the Mail yesterday, they had a picture of her in a swimsuit as well. At the end of the day, it was Boris Johnson who, organised this payment, not Carrie. Whatever the kind of ins and outs of their relationship are when it comes to interior design, the book stops with him. And I just think that should be remembered in all of this. And we shouldn't be censoring his partner, fiancé. We should be censoring Boris Johnson because he is the Prime Minister and he should really be able to deal with renovating a flat without kind of getting into a scandal. You'd hope our Prime Minister could do that, at least.
Let's take a look at the front of the Daily Express. Guto, laser-focused Boris takes aim at critics. He's saying there's nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. But, of course, when a politician says that, it simply makes journalists believe there really is something to see. But Number 10 really are pulling up the drawbridge, aren't they?
Well, there are good things to be getting on with. And what is quite interesting tonight, we haven't seen all the papers for tomorrow. Maybe an hour from now, we will see something that is a new revelation. We don't have a new revelation now. We don't have anything new that's emerging. We just have more and more inquiries and the recycling and the, rehashing of a story that's been around for months, actually, that there were renovations to the flat and nobody quite knew who'd paid for them. So it is one where there are more important things. And if you contrast, perhaps, the stories about the wallpaper with the kind of stories about what Joe Biden is doing in America, with the challenges, the hideous stuff going on in places like India and all the rest of it, it does make, the whole thing look ridiculous.
Although, if you look at the list of investigations, there's the Jennifer Arcuri affair, there's the Mustique holiday, there's 3 investigations into the flat refurbishment, there's the Cameron lobbying, there's the Dyson text. I mean, it does all give a sense, doesn't it, of chaos in many ways inside Number 10. And it does bring into question the Prime Minister's integrity, doesn't it?
It's good how you can just turn all these separate things, none of which are particularly menacing, into a great big swirling cloud. And I have been on the other side. The first term of Boris Johnson as mayor, people said it was chaos in the inside because there were deputy mayors resigning and stuff. And on the inside, the focus was very much on cutting crime and on investing in transport and getting on with the job. Now, I'm not going to pretend that it must be hunky-dory inside Number 10 at the moment. It is challenging, and these things are hugely distracting. And it's a shame that there are such distractions over things that are so ultimately trivial. If we take a step back, do we really want our prime ministers to be unable to serve dinners at Chequers, their country retreat, or to redecorate a flat? And it's not like you can call your mate in to come and do the painting for you. It's a listed building with security clearance. I imagine it's a nightmare to do up a flat in Number 10, and really they should be allowed to sort of get on with it. And we should judge them on whether we think Brexit is the right thing, and whether the handling of the pandemic is the right thing, and whether we think that, the sort of conduct in Parliament is the right thing. And that, in the end, is something that Boris Johnson has proved time and time again, that because he doesn't pretend to be whiter than white on a sort of personal, human level, people have got used to that, they should judge him on what he does as Prime Minister.
Well, that leads us very nicely onto the Daily Mail, Nadine, because the headline there is, what a boost for Britain. Vaccine for almost all over 40s. Infections plummet, almost 50 million jabs given. Things are going incredibly well with the vaccine rollout. We're in a good place in this country. And that is what people are going to be focusing on, isn't it?
I think it's some really much needed good news after, over a year now, really, of lockdown. And yeah, it is some good news. I think it's a nice relief to kind of hear something that's not the flat thing, although it is important. The flat thing is important. I've had both of my vaccines. My mom's had both of her vaccines, and we've been shielding for quite a long time. So I'm looking forward to being able to get out into the world again. And I know there'll be a lot of other people who are shielding who probably felt that they were a bit ignored that are going to be looking forward to getting back to normal. And I'm just looking forward to be able to go to the pub and hug my mates and not have to worry about, infecting them or at least not worry as much. But yeah.
I mean, the figures are fantastic, Guto, aren't there? There's no denying that. Only 757 symptomatic cases a day in England. The chance now of getting infected is as low as 1 in 150,000 for those like Nadine who've had both jabs.
Yes, and my arm here is sore from having my second jab yesterday, and hopefully next week I'm going to start jabbing other people because I'm a volunteer vaccinator, and I can't wait to get stuck in. But we have turned the corner here, and it's a big thing. And sometimes it's that sort of playing not fast and loose, but actually not being so preoccupied with process and procedure and holding back and ticking every box that allows somebody like Boris Johnson to get something like the vaccine sorted. That drive, that energy, that sort of refusal to take no from process-obsessed people that gets things done. And what we're starting to see now, there's going to be a lot more of it. Evidence of other things that we like doing, going back to the pub. There's talk about being able to go to concerts, football matches, rugby matches with a bit of luck. There's a Lions, test match going on before they fly out to South Africa. There's going to be a rugby match in Edinburgh. It'd be fantastic if there was a small crowd at least there. So there's all this positive stuff to look forward to. And I really don't care who paid for the wallpaper at number 10, knowing in the end that it was Boris Johnson, of course, himself who did it.
I'm a bit concerned about you jabbing people. Have you ever done that before?
I've been trained, and I must say it's a tribute to St John's Ambulance, the NHS, healthcare workers, that they have managed to train thousands of people who you need some sort of basic knowledge. But yes, they take you to another level where you can hopefully do this thing safely. Excellent.
Well, good luck. And Nadine, given the success of the vaccine and the rollout and all the data is looking pretty positive, do you think we're right to stick to this timetable? It's still going to be some time, isn't it, before we're given all our freedoms back?
I think it's hard to say. I think obviously the epidemiologists and the scientists know best. Some of the concerns I've had are that there are people in care homes that have had both vaccines or are still being told they can't do certain things. They can't go and see relatives if they've also had 2 vaccines. There are things that I think need to be looked at. For example, shielders who haven't been out in months. Perhaps they should be able to do certain things before others. I'm not sure. I think it's a good timetable. We're going in the right direction, but there are some people who have had a much tougher pandemic than others, particularly shielders, particularly people in care homes. And I think that needs to be looked at. If persons have both vaccines and they're in a care home and their loved ones have 2, you'd hope that they'd be able to see each other. But I think there's restrictions still on that at the moment.
Yeah, OK, we'll leave it there for the moment. Guto and Nadine, thank you very much, because coming up in part 2, we're going to take a look at the front of the FT and the US economy and President Biden's big plans, spending trillions. That's after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. Still with me, former aide to Boris Johnson, Guto Harri, and the political correspondent at PolticsJoe, Nadine Batchelor-Hunt. Front page of the Financial Times. Guto, why don't you kick off part 2? Incredible numbers coming out of the US when it comes to the economy.
They really are. And this gives me hope. We've seen a year of every effort of the state being put into stopping us doing stuff, to stay at home, to close down, to not go out. And this is a sign that, there could be exciting times ahead, because the US is certainly motoring 6.4% GDP growth. Just imagine what that is happening. Of course, there's a huge injection of money going in there. There's a Green Deal, there's jobs, there's infrastructure investments. But there's a real sense from a man, actually, who's, not a spring chicken in the White House, that energy, that ambition, that sense of drive. He's talking about competing with China to win the 21st century. This is really dynamic, uplifting stuff. And I would love it if we got back to that kind of stuff over here. It's something to look forward to if we can get there.
Yeah, Nadine, he's shaking off the Sleepy Joe tag, isn't he? Do you share Guto's optimism and enthusiasm?
I think Joe Biden's really gone beyond the expectations of many people. I think particularly those to the left of him. Biden always said that he wants to bring people together, was going to bring together the right of his party, the left of his party. I think yesterday he was tweeting about how trickle-down economics just doesn't work. This is all very interesting coming from Biden. A lot of people saw him as an old-fashioned centrist, and he's really hitting out the park. I've been very impressed, and I would like to see that sort of politics over here. I would like to say one thing, though, that things like transgender rights, I think they're more progressive over there when it comes to the rhetoric that comes up from Biden compared to some of the leaders over here. So I'd like to see some of that brought over. But yeah, I think Biden is doing very well, and I think he's exceeded expectations to those of the left of him.
OK, and Nadine, just staying with you, front of the Daily Telegraph, tech giants face racism crackdown. Tell us about this. Yeah,
so anybody that's kind of colour or a minority on social media knows how bad racism can be. I think the government's controversial race report from a few weeks ago, although there was a lot on it that a lot of people disagreed on, one of the things it did say is that online abuse is something that's a serious problem. And I'm finding it quite heartening to see more serious action being dealt and done to deal with that. There are people of colour that are bullied off social media, and we should be able to use social media without having torrents of abuse. Footballers should be able to go and play football without worrying that they're going to have death threats and, being compared to monkeys online, that sort of stuff. So it's really good to see this. Although I think there's a bit of a strange part where it says Ofcom will also get powers to protect free speech from stopping woke social media firms. Woke has become a kind of meaningless term. I'm not entirely sure what they mean by that. But I think it could only be positive, in my view, having experienced racism online.
Yeah, and Guto, this comes, doesn't it, on the eve of football's weekend boycott of social media?
Yes, and it's one of those things for a long time. If you're a broadcaster like yourself, of course, you have to abide by certain rules. You are responsible for what goes out on your platforms. The same with newspapers. And it's long been a source of great frustration for established, responsible media, whatever the political viewpoints they have, that they rightly have to abide by certain standards. But there are other platforms out there where it's a free-for-all. It's anarchy. And it's about time, in a way, though I'm nervous about, who curates free speech. There are big issues there, but it is good to see some sort of move towards making sure that these massive firms that make huge profits have just a tiny bit of the kind of regulation and restraint that the rest of us have to live by.
OK, we must leave it there. Guto, Nadine, great to speak to you. Thank you both.